All right, everyone. Welcome. Happy Thursday. We made it to Thursday. Hope everyone's doing okay. I'm getting by. Thursday's my Friday, so I've got my Fridays off, so, stuff to do. Hopefully I'll do something interesting this weekend. I doubt it, though. Currently I'm looking for work, as you guys probably know, if you're my regulars. I do have a phone interview tomorrow, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, not a whole lot has happened since Tuesday. Just living and working and that sort of a thing. How are you guys doing this week? How's your week going so far? I think we have a Renaissance fair actually here locally happening. Kind of excited about that. I've done Renaissance fair at least once or twice before, which is kind of cool because, Dungeons and Dragons in the medieval period is always interesting. So maybe I'll take a look at that, masked and stuff like that. I don't know. We'll see. I'm a bit afraid to go out in public because a bunch of mouth breathers out there not vaccinating, not masking or social distancing or any of that shit to keep us safe. So I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. All right. If you guys don't have anything, anybody have anything before we get started here? Got about 3 links that are kind of just for your information, and then we'll get into the core of the articles that we're going to go over today. Anything? Anybody? Going once. And again, this is if you don't already know, this is my policy site. This is my blog. I write about politics and stuff. All right, we'll get started here. All right, if you haven't seen this, can I start this over? Let's start this over. Here. Overconsumption equals extinction. This is within a fashion show. She just got right up on there and said, boom. And she gets tackled. Mad props to her for jumping out there and doing that. That's some, she got some ovaries on her. Oh, and there's another one who popped in. Oh, I didn't see that one. I haven't seen this whole thing. Models are just going along. Is there another one? Nope, that's it. So that's a thing. Just so you know what's going on there. I'll throw that in here. And this is just you want to take a look at it again. That's a Louis Vuitton show is what that is. All right. Now let's actually go over here, which is interesting. In a historic first, World Health Organization approves vaccine to prevent malaria. That's a big deal in Africa, right? It's going to be a big deal here in the United States too, as the climate and stuff moves those diseases and those insects to the north, because that's going to be a thing we're going to have to worry about at some point in the near future. We're not going to go over this article. It's just there so that you know that it is a thing. And then there's this, which is kind of enraging. CDC recommends virtual Thanksgiving this year. Now, I agree with this completely, but the thing is at their point as well, I got this from Facebook and someone shared this and basically said the same thing. I would say, well, why do we have in-school in-person schooling when we should be having Thanksgiving virtual? I mean, it's ridiculous. We should still be having virtual schooling. Yeah, and this sort of a thing. I know my family sure isn't going to be having virtual Thanksgiving because, they're all conservative, don't care, whatever, and all that. But yeah, it's a thing. Not happy. There you go. All right. those are 3 for your information. Anyone else have anything before we get started here? No, I don't want that there. What am I doing? What am I doing? Now we'll get into the normal gloom and doom and anti-capitalist stuff that you all love. All right, there we go. All right. Start here with The Guardian. The new elites phony crusade to save the world without changing anything. Yeah, it's talking about the green capitalism and things like that, right? I mean, like, oh, come on, get on there. You know, Musk and Bezos and so on could end world poverty globally, could end world hunger globally, but they just don't do that. All right. Today's titans of tech and finance want to solve the world's problems as long as the solutions never, ever threaten their own wealth and power. True dat. A successful society is a progress machine. It takes in the raw material of innovations and produces broad human advancement. America's machine is broken. The same could be said of others around the world. And now many of the people who broke the progress machine are trying to sell us their services as repairmen. Again, capitalism, right? You try to monetize every single aspect of the problem. You monetize the creation of the problem, and you monetize the solution to the problem. When the fruits of challenge have fallen off the U.S. in recent decades, the very fortunate have basketed almost all of them. For instance, the average pre-tax income of the top 10th of Americans has doubled since 1980. That of the top 1% has more than tripled, and that of the top 0.001% has risen more than sevenfold, even as the average pre-tax income of the bottom half of Americans has stayed almost precisely the same. These familiar figures amount to 3.5 decades worth of wondrous head-spinning change with zero impact on the average pay of 117 million Americans. Globally, over the same period, according to the World Inequality Report, the top 1% captured 27% of new income, while the bottom half of humanity presently, more than 3 billion people, saw 12% of it. The vast number of Americans and others in the West have scarcely benefited from the age. It is not because of a lack of innovation, but because of social arrangements that fail to turn new stuff into better lives. For example, American scientists make the most important discoveries in medicine and genetics and publish more biomedical research than those of any other country, but the average American's health remains worse and slower improving than that of peers in other rich countries, and in some years, life expectancy actually declines. Right, and again, we talk about this, it's all about inequality, right? Inequality, if you again go to my policies, the introduction, the books you need to read, spirit level and the inner level specifically talk about this very thing, that inequality can be used as a predictor for life expectancy, incarceration rates, all that sort of stuff, right? So we have the highest level of inequality in the developed world, and therefore our healthcare is garbage and our lifespan is in decline and lower than that of Europe, right? So that's just the way it works. Now here we need, of course, universal health care. That would pretty much get us caught up to well, I won't say get us caught up to everyone, but it would drastically help to reduce help close the gap between us and Europe. That's a huge thing. We need universal health care. So that way we can benefit from all of these amazing and important discoveries in medicine here in the United States. American inventors create astonishing new ways to learn thanks to the power of video and the internet, many of them free of charge, but the average U.S. high school leaver tests more poorly in reading today than in 1992. Again, this has to do with inequality, the Reagan era, trickle-down economics, and everything that we have lost due to that increase in inequality from the Reagan era. The country has had a culinary renaissance, as one publication puts it, one farmer's market and whole food store at a time, but it has failed to improve the nutrition of most people, with the incidence of obesity and related conditions rising over time. Yeah, again, inequality, healthcare, inequality in healthcare are a big part of that. And of course, the decline of unions, which means also the decline in workers' rights and workers' benefits, right? Those are huge things. And of course, here in the United States, with the increase in inequality and the rampant control of our government and our politics and our laws that corporations have, they get to continue to pump out basically food that is there to kill you. Like, as I've said before, you go into the store and 90% of the food that's there is trying to kill you. And these these food-like substance companies are creating foods. They're creating food-like substances to kill you for fun and profit. And that's a part of it. And the fact that these food-like substances, which are trying to kill you, are cheaper than actual real food. And then, of course, because of the high level of inequality, the poverty, and all this, the wage slavery and the debt slavery, that people who are struggling don't have the energy to cook, don't have the time to cook, and they want the food that's bad for them because it's comfort food and it tastes good and it helps them, it helps people to cope, right? So if you want to help deal with this, universal health care, minimum wage, housing, get rid of student debt, make education free, all the normal stuff we talk about here. If you want to solve all these problems, it's very, very easy. We already know how to solve all of this. Tools for becoming an entrepreneur appear to be more accessible than ever for the student who learns coding online or the Uber driver, but the share of young people who own a business has fallen by 2/3 since the 1980s. America has birthed both a wildly successful online book superstore, Amazon, and another company, Google, that has scanned more than 25 million books for public use, but illiteracy has remained stubbornly in place, and the fraction of Americans who read at least one work of literature a year has dropped by almost a quarter in recent decades. Okay, again, the education problem, right? That's very strongly tied to inequality. People who are struggling, families who are struggling, have children who are struggling, and children who are struggling, it's very difficult for them to do well in school. And I'm run for school board. Education is something I'm passionate about, right? And when you have people of color and white people who are cast into poverty is devastating, obviously to families, but to children directly, and it creates brain damage in our children, making them much more prone to acting out and harder to learn and all these other things. Again, if you want children to do better, the answer for every problem we have is decrease inequality. Increase minimum wage, maximum wage, universal health care, nationalize healthcare, nationalize pharmaceutical industries, have more time off, more vacation, mandatory vacation for all jobs, mandatory sick time, or have sick time required for all jobs, right? And if you really want to get into it, then you have the required benefit of part of your healthcare package to pay for people for a gym membership or something like that, so that they can work out and take care of themselves, and give them time during the workday to do that, right? There's all the shit I talk about my policies. We know all the answers. It's just there's no profit in taking care of people. It's much better to murder people for fun and profit than it is to actually solve the problem. In literature, I understand why they say this. They basically, what do they consider literature? Like literature, like actual literary works, or just nonfiction works, or just fiction, or nonfiction works, or fiction works? What qualifies as literature? I'm assuming they mean, I don't know what they mean. Brochure? It's probably having to do with non-fiction based works, but I don't know. The government has more data at its disposal and more ways of talking and listening to citizens, but only a quarter as many people find it trustworthy as it did in the tempestuous 1960s, of course, because of inequality. Again, following the 1960s, especially the Vietnam War protests, especially at the universities, there's been this war on education. And of course, that has had a huge impact on our Americans and upward mobility and things of that nature. And of course, that ends up with debt slavery, with the student loans, and the upward mobility goes lower because they don't have as good of an education. Therefore, it's harder for them to get better jobs. And then, of course, 1980s hits, right? And then we've got the Reagan era and austerity and Reaganomics and that sort of shit. So it's a steaming shit pile of inequality. Meanwhile, the opportunity to get ahead has been transformed from a shared reality to a prerequisite of already being ahead. Among Americans born in 1940, those raised at the top of the upper middle class and the bottom of the lower middle class shared a roughly 90% chance of realizing the so-called American dream of ending up better off than their parents. Among Americans born in 1984, turning into adulthood today, the reality is split screen. Those raised near the top of the income ladder now have a 70% chance of realizing the dream. Meanwhile, those close to the bottom, more in need of elevation, have a 35% chance of climbing above their parents' station. And it is not only progress and money that the fortunate monopolize. Rich American men who tend to live longer than the average citizens of any other country now live 15 years longer than poor American men who endure only as long as men in Sudan and Pakistan. Right, and this inequality thing, again, it's devastating. The fact that we have such high levels of inequality in this country means everyone dies sooner, especially those at the bottom. And again here, right, those at the top, of course, have a 70% chance of being better off than their parents. If you have money, you can make money. That's the thing. But with the higher level of inequality and impoverishment in this country, it's almost impossible for people who are, impoverished or even lower middle class to get beyond what their parents did. Like, especially if you're impoverished, it takes 20 years of nothing going wrong in order to get beyond poverty, and that doesn't happen, right? Your socioeconomic class is something that is intergenerationally transmitted. So whatever economic class your parents are in is the one you are most likely going to be in, and progress is very, very difficult in this country. Thus, many millions of Americans on the left and right feel one thing in common, that the game is rigged against people like them. Perhaps this is why we hear constant condemnation of the system, for it is the system that people expect to turn fortuitous developments into societal progress. Instead, the system in America and across much of the world has been organized to siphon the gains from innovation upward, so that the fortunes of the world's billionaires now grow at more than double the pace of everyone else's. In the top 10% of humanity have come to hold 85% of the planet's motherfucking wealth. The top 10% of humanity globally have come to hold 85% of the planet's wealth. That is fucking mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. New data published this week by Oxfam showed that the world's 2,200 billionaires grew 12% wealthier in 2018, while the bottom half of humanity got 11% poorer. It is no wonder, given these facts, that the voting public in the US and elsewhere seems to have turned more resentful and suspicious in recent years, embracing populist movements on the left and right, bringing socialism and nationalism into the center of political life in a way that once seemed unthinkable, and succumbing to all manner of conspiracy theory and fake news. Again, education and inequality are core drivers to this. Again, when you look at, because I talk about here, right, this inequality goes up, social trust goes down, therefore tribalism and fear goes up, and therefore you get this sort of a thing, increasing the ideological divide and conspiracy theories and all that sort of stuff. In addition to the harms caused by the lack of critical thinking through the attack on the education system. This is spreading recognition on both sides of the ideological divide that the system is broken and that the system has to change. Some elites faced with this kind of gathering anger, have hidden behind walls and gates on landed estates, emerging only to try to seize even greater political power to protect themselves against the mob. See you, Koch brothers. But in recent years, a great many fortunate Americans have also tried something else, something both laudable and self-serving. They have tried to help by taking ownership of the problem. All around us, the winners in our highly inequitable status quo declare themselves partisans of change. They know the problem, and they want to be part of the solution. Actually, they want to lead the search for solutions. They believe their solutions deserve to be at the forefront of social change. They may join or support movements initiated by ordinary people looking to fix aspects of their society. More often, though, these elites start initiatives of their own, taking on social change as though it were just another stock in the portfolio of corporations to restructure. Because they are in charge of these attempts at social change, the attempts naturally reflect their biases. And of course, if rich people if they're rich and they have resources, they can start organizations to work on things in the way that they work on social issues and stuff like that in the way that they want to do them. But naturally, it'll be done for the most part, within the context of their capitalistic or sociopathic bias. And it'll end up being, to an extent, the commodification of the solution, as we talked about in the beginning, right? The capitalism and the commodification of and exploitation of humanity and the environment causes the problem, and they want to do the same thing to solve it. And they could just, again, spend their billions and billions to work towards solving the problem, but they don't. Again, like philanthropy, right? Creating nonprofits and philanthropy as part of that con job for them to make it look like that they are solving the problem when they're not really. If they wanted to, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk could drop billions and billions to solve world hunger and all sorts of other things. That's not what they want to do. For the most part, these initiatives are not democratic, nor do they reflect collective problem solving or universal solutions. Rather, they favor the use of the private sector and its charitable spoils, the market way of looking at things and the bypassing of government. They reflect a highly influential view that the winners of an unjust status quo and the tools and mentalities and values that help them win are the secret to redressing the injustices. Those at greatest risk of being resented in an age of inequality are thereby recast as our saviors from an age of inequality, because they have the money and the influence and the power to actually do something, even though they don't really do anything, right? We look at I have my post covering the symbolism and themes within the Joker movie. That was one of the things in there, the white savior complex, and talking like Penny Arthur Fleck's mother saw Batman's father, Wayne, the Wayne father, as the only person who could solve the problem because he was, a billionaire and rich. Socially minded financiers at Goldman Sachs seek to change the world through win-win initiatives such as green bonds and impact investing. Greenwashing, right? Tech companies such as Uber and Airbnb cast themselves as empowering the poor by allowing them to chauffeur people around or rent out spare rooms. Management consultants and Wall Street brains seek to convince the social sector that they should guide its pursuit of greater equality by assuming board seats and leadership positions. Conferences and idea festivals sponsored by plutocrats in big business such as World Economic Forum which is underway in Davos, Switzerland this week, hosts panels on injustice and promote thought leaders who are willing to confine their thinking to improve lives within the faulty system rather than tackling the faults. Yeah, and I really like a lot of things that World Economic Forum posts. They post some really great stuff. I mean, they really do. And I've actually bought Davos's book, I think it is, or not Davos, whoever the guy is that created the quote, Great Reset. I haven't had a chance to read it. But from what I've heard, essentially, it's just, using, again, capitalism like we're talking about here to try and solve the problem. I mean, it's not that we can't do that. We can. But the sort of actual solutions that we need to solve our problems aren't ones that they are actually really willing to do. Again, you look at my policies, right? High minimum wage, high maximum wage, nationalized healthcare, nationalized pharmaceuticals. We could. I haven't quite said nationalized food production, but that's something we could look at too. Municipalize or nationalize energy production. Gut the U.S. military by at least 75% and use that for sustainable energy, UBI, universal housing, and so on and so forth. All these things are the sorts of things we need to be doing. We also need to be really, and this is not part of my policies yet, but putting Facebook and Twitter and Amazon under a global, under the cognizance of a global organization. Into the global commons. There we go. All right, so here we go. Yes, inequality. Profitable companies built in questionable ways and employing reckless means to engage in corporate social responsibility, and some rich people make a splash by giving back, regardless of the fact that they may have caused serious societal problems as they built their fortunes. Right, again, it's, as these people get rich, the harm they cause is a negative externality. Pollution, the, not giving people health care, the exploitation of third world countries, and the environmental damage done by that exploitation as well in third world countries, and so on. And just the fact that these billionaires exist in and of itself causes harm. But they're not really looking at solving that, because that would threaten, of course, their millions and their billions and, their control of the government and all that sort of garbage, right? Okay. Elite networking forums such as the Aspen Institute and the Clinton Global Initiative groom the rich to be self-appointed leaders of social change, taking on the problems people like them have been instrumental in creating or sustaining. A new breed of community-minded so-called B corporations, I don't know what B Corps are, has been born, reflecting a faith that more enlightened corporate self-interest rather than, say, public regulation is the surest guarantor of public welfare. Well, okay. Ultimately, corporations aren't going to make the decision to, harm their profit in order to do things the right way, at least not en masse. I'm sure there's going to be one here, two there, or whatever, but ultimately, you're going to have to require laws to do this, and my policies do just that. We need to change the laws so that companies which shift their operation to be regenerative, open source, circular economies are the ones that should be rewarded, and those that aren't should be punished by, again, you look at the economies for the common good, my policies, right? That sort of concept that, if you've got good, you start rating the companies on, healthcare, minimum wage, vacation, and the level of inequality between the lowest paid and the highest paid, and that sort of thing, right? So that the companies that are the most ethical may get tax breaks or even a negative tax bracket, as well as having access to state and public and federal contracts, whereas those who rank low because they're polluting and exploiting workers and all that sort of stuff, then their taxes go up on the company itself and as well as their management, and will not have access to federal and local contracts. There are ways that we can do that. All my policies are all about that sort of a thing. But again, why they don't want public regulation, that means they can do whatever they want and not be forced to do anything and they can get away with. So if they try and do something that's possibly good, they can just say fuck it and do whatever they want afterwards when they don't like doing it because it harms their profit. A pair of Silicon Valley billionaires fund an initiative to rethink the Democratic Party. One of them can claim without a hint of irony that their goals are to amplify the voices of the powerless and reduce the political influence of rich people like them. That's pretty funny. Pretty funny. Fuck Bill Clinton. He should be in jail. He's a war criminal. All U.S. presidents are war criminals. The genre of elites believes and promotes the idea that social change should be pursued principally through the free market and voluntary action, not public life and law, and the reform of systems that people share in common. That it should be supervised by the winners of capitalism and their allies and not be antagonistic to their needs, and that the biggest beneficiaries of the status quo should play a leading role in the status quo's reform. Right, of course, because they don't want to lose their money and their power. And it should be the exact opposite. Those on top, eat the rich. We should be, again, instituting wealth taxes, a progressive wealth tax, as well as a maximum wage and a high minimum wage, and taking from them their wealth. And those of us who, suffer at the bottom, should be really talking about, well, what do we need to really change things? This is what I call market world, an ascendant power elite defined by the concurrent drives to do well and do good to change the world while also profiting from the status quo. It consists of enlightened business people and their collaborators in the worlds of charity, academia, media, government, and think tanks. It has its own thinkers, whom it calls thought leaders, its own language, even its own territory, including a constantly shifting archipelago of conferences at which its values are reinforced and disseminated and translated into action. Market world is a network and community, but is also a culture and state of mind. Right, so again, as they put their money into this sort of a thing, they're 5%, 1%, and 10% into this, they still remain, as long as it looks like they're doing good things, people are going to look beyond that and not look to their other, 10 billion, 20 billion, 100 billion dollars that they have. It's a sleight of hand. See, look over here. We're doing good things. The elites of market world often speak in a language of changing the world and making the world a better place, language more typically associated with protest barricades than ski resorts. Yet we are left with the inescapable fact that even these elites have done much to help. They have continued to hoard the overwhelming share of progress. The average American's life has scarcely improved, and virtually all of the U.S. institutions, with the exception of the military, have lost the public's trust. What do you mean? The U.S. military has definitely lost the public's trust. We know they're the largest terrorist organization in the world. And one of the largest polluters. One of the towering figures in this new approach to changing the world is the former U.S. President Bill Clinton. After leaving office in 2001, he came to champion through his foundation and his annual Clinton Global Initiative gatherings in New York, a mode of public-private world improvement that brought together actors like Goldman Sachs, the Rockefeller Foundation, and McDonald's, sometimes with a governmental partner, to solve big problems in ways plutocrats could get on board with. Well, then they're not really solving problems. If the rich people are on board, then you're not really solving problems. I mean, that's just, hello. After the populist eruption that resulted in Hillary Clinton's defeat because she's a fucking horrible human being and a horrible candidate, thank God she fucking lost because her ass needs to be in jail. Not that I don't like her. In 2016, I wrote a whole post on why I'm not voting for her. Not just because I'm a green, but, I was actually looking at who to vote for. If there wasn't someone good in the Democratic Party, then, well, I definitely vote green. And there wasn't, so I voted green. And Hillary Clinton, oh my God, how horrible she was. Anyhow, I asked the former president what he thought lay behind the surge of public anger. The pain and road rage we see reflected in the election has been building for a long time, he said. Oh, Bill Clinton was a part of that. He thought the anger is being fed in part by the feeling that the most powerful people in the government, economy, and society no longer care about them or look down on them. They want to be part of the progress towards shared opportunities, shared stability, and shared prosperity. But when it came to his proposed solution, it sounded a lot like the model to which he was already committed. The only answer is to build an aggressive, creative partnership involving all levels of government, the private sector, and non-government organizations to make it better. Again, yes, this is wrong. You start with the government, you tax the rich, you spend trillions of dollars a year building infrastructure, sustainable energy, vertical farms, education, healthcare, and yeah, you get rid of the billions and billions of wealth. In other words, the only answer is to pursue social change outside of traditional public forums, with the political representatives of humankind as one input among several. And corporations have the big say in whether they would sponsor a given initiative or not. Exactly. The public's anger, of course, has been directed in part at the very elites he had sought to convene, on whom he had gambled his theory of post-political problem-solving, who had lost the trust of so many millions of people, making them feel betrayed, uncared for, and scorned. Yeah, and I think the Clinton Foundation lost most of their actual funding once Hillary Clinton lost her election. I mean, it went almost bone dry. Because obviously the Clintons, at least Hillary specifically, definitely did pay for play during her time as Secretary of State and whatever else she's done. So as long as people can't get money and power from them for their government, then yeah, they stopped donating to them. What people have been rejecting in the US as well as in Britain, Hungary, and elsewhere was, in their view, ruled by global elites who put the pursuit of profit above the needs of their neighbors and fellow citizens. These were elites who seemed more loyal to one another than to their own communities, elites who often showed greater interest in distant humanitarian causes than the pain of people 10 miles to the east or west. Frustrated citizens felt they possessed no power over the spreadsheet, and PowerPoint-wielding elites commensurate with the power of these elites had gained over them, whether in switching around their hours or automating their plant or quietly slipping into law a new billionaire-made curriculum for the children's school. Yes, fucking common motherfucking core. What they did not appreciate was the world being changed without them, and not just being changed without them, without their say, but also changing without giving a flying fuck how those changes affect them. Not just not caring, but knowing full well the harm it's going to cause and laughing all the way to the bank. Again, destroying the world for fun and profit. Again, I'm going to share my post here on this, right? Exactly what they're talking about. Here is my post, tension within methods of exchange, right? This is why that is a thing. Why the rich don't care. Well, because they are rich, because the tension within methods of exchange. Because the moment there's inequality, the moment someone has more power than someone else, they become sociopathic. That's just the way it is. Which raises a question for all of us. Are we ready to hand over our future to the plutocratic elites, one supposedly world-changing initiative at a time? Are we ready to call participatory democracy a failure and to declare these other private forms of change-making the new way forward? Is the decrepit state of American self-government an excuse to work around it and let it further atrophy, or is meaningful democracy in which we all potentially have a voice worth fighting for? See, the thing about democracy in the United States is that we have never, ever actually had a democracy, and we still don't have one. I mean, I wrote about this in one of my posts, I think why you need to vote in every single election, and I had a small section on this. Right, because when the United States was founded, only white landowning males could vote, which is about 6% of the people in America. Right, only 6% could vote in the beginning, and then eventually white males could vote, and that included black males, although the majority of Africans were in the South, so they really didn't have really any vote at all. And then eventually, of course, women won the right to vote. The Chinese won the right to vote, and then the First Peoples won the right to vote. But again, people had to fight for it. People had to die for it. Still in today's world, we have gerrymandering, and all sorts of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, right? And all sorts of other horrors that keep us from having any level of actual democracy in this country. I mean, it's any article says, even like I started reading Andrew Yang's new book, right? A threat to our democracy. I'm like, what fucking democracy? We've never had a democracy. And if you're gonna have a serious conversation about this, we really need to start with recognizing that we've never had a democracy in this country. Never had a democracy. I mean, if you're not willing to start with that, it's not really a serious conversation. We have to acknowledge that first. There is no denying that today's American elite may be among the more socially concerned elites in history, only performatively. They're the ones who performatively seem socially concerned. But it is also by the cold logic of numbers among the more predatory, by refusing to risk its way of life, by rejecting the idea that the powerful might have to sacrifice for the common good. It clings to a set of social arrangements that allow it to monopolize progress and then give symbolic scraps to the forsaken, many of whom wouldn't need the scraps if society were working right. True statement. It is vital that we try to understand the connection between these elites' social concern and predation, between the extraordinary helping and the extraordinary hoarding, between the milking and perhaps abetting of an unjust status quo and the attempts by the milkers to repair a small part of it. It's also important to understand how the elites see the world so that we might better assess the merits and limitations of their world-changing campaigns. Well, I don't know how this is even a question. They're a bunch of psychopaths who just want to gain, who just murdering people in the environment for fun and profit. That's all. It's that simple. It's that simple. And the most compassionate thing we can do for the millionaires and the billionaires and the megacorps, at least the millionaires and the billionaires, is to take their money from them. Take their wealth from them, because their wealth makes them psychopaths, at the very least sociopaths, which directly has them causing harm to people and the environment. They literally have brain damage from the inequality. So the compassionate thing to do is to remove them of that thing that causes that brain damage. This is about public health. I mean, they're literally harming themselves. They have an addiction to hoarding, and we need to help them, relieve them of that problem, and to help make sure that they can get the help that they need. There are many ways to make sense of all of this elite concern and predation. One is that the elites are doing the best they can. This is bullshit. This is bullshit. This is absolutely total bullshit. The world is what it is. The system is what it is. The forces of the age are bigger than anyone can resist, and the most fortunate are helping. That's bullshit too. This view may allow that elite helplessness is just a drop in the bucket, but reassures itself that at least it is something. We are sitting here on with climate change here, and we are headed for the worst case scenario of RCP 8.5, right? The worst case scenario is RCP 8.5, which is a 4.6 degree increase by 2100. I mean, every single model you look at, we are headed for the worst possible one, right? At least something, motherfucking at least something, does not save humanity from extinction. In 200 years or so, there will be almost no life left on this planet. Because that 4.6 degree increase by, 2100 is going to be even a much larger jump than that in the next 100 years after that. Because it will accelerate. It will accelerate. I don't know what it's going to be in 20. What is RCP? Let's see. RCP 8.5. Can I get a graph here? What's it going to be? I want temperature. They want CO2. Let's look at temperature. No, come on, temperature. Ah! Okay, so yeah, we're looking at a 4 point. This has a little less than that. Okay, 4 point something by 2100. Let's go by 2200. See, it's accelerating. It's getting big. Okay, so can we get 2200? Is this? Here we go. So we're at 8.5. That's what we're headed for. So 2100 is about. Okay, it says 4 point. Yeah, about 4.5, 4.6. Then 2200, we're headed for, okay, a 6.5 degree increase. That is going to be devastating. We're not going to have anything left on this planet. No plant life, no human life. Yeah, we can't just be carbon neutral. We have to go for carbon negative because it's going to overshoot and then it's going to come down. So we have to get it negative so that we can pull it down sooner so that we can reduce the amount of temperature overshoot. Oh my God. Oh my God. At least it is something is bullshit. That's what the Democrats talk about. At least we've thrown everyone a bone. See, we did something. But whatever that bullshit is that you've thrown at us doesn't save humanity from extinction. Doesn't actually solve the problems large scale. A slightly more critical view is that this sort of change is well-meaning but inadequate, like I just ranted about. It treats symptoms, not root causes. True statement. It does not change the fundamentals of what ails us. According to this view, elites are shirking the duty of more meaningful reform. True statement. But there's still another darker way of judging what goes on when elites put themselves in the vanguard of social change. That doing so not only fails to make things better, but also serves to keep things as they are. True statement. After all, it takes the edge off some of the public's anger at being excluded from the progress. It improves the image of the winners by using private involuntary half measures. It crowds out public solutions that would solve problems for everyone, and to do so with or without the elite's blessing. There is no question that the outpouring of elite-led social change in our era does great good and soothes pain and saves lives, but we should also recall Oscar Wilde's words about such elite helpfulness being not a solution, but an aggravation of the difficulty. More than a century ago, in an age of churn like our own, more than a century ago, in an age of churn like our own, he wrote, just as the worst slave owners were those who were kind to slaves and so prevented the horror of the system being realized by those who suffered from it and understood by those who contemplated it. So in the present state of things in England, the people who do most harm are the people who try to do the most good. We have to tear down the whole system like my policies talk about. While its formulation may sound extreme to modern ears, how can there be anything wrong with trying to do good? But the answer may be when the good is an accomplice to even greater, if more invisible harm. In our era, that harm is the concentration of money and power among a small few who reap from that concentration a near monopoly on the benefits of change. And do-gooding pursued by elites tends not only to leave this concentration untouched, but also shore it up. True statement. For when elites assume leadership of social change, they are able to reshape what social change is, above all, to present it as something that should never threaten winners. In an age defined by a chasm between those who have power and those who don't, elites have spread the idea that people must be helped, but only in market-friendly ways that do not upset fundamental power equations. Society should be changed in ways that do not change the underlying economic system that has allowed the winners to win and fostered many of the problems they seek to solve. True statement. The broad fidelity to this law helps make sense of what we observe all around. Powerful people fighting to change the world in ways that essentially keep it the same, and giving back in ways that sustain an indefensible distribution of influence, resources, and tools. Is there a better way? This is a long-ass article. Is there a better way? Yes, there is. Here you go. Right here. Here's my policies. The Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, a research and policy organization that works on behalf of the world's richest countries, has compared the prevailing elite posture to that of the fictional 19th century Italian aristocrat Tancredi Falconeri from Giuseppe Thomas di Lampedusa's novel The Leopard, who declares, if we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. If this view is correct, then much of today's charity and social innovation and buy one, get one marketing may not be measures of reform, so much as forms of conservative self-defense measures that protect elites from more menacing change. That's exactly right. Among the kinds of issues being sidelined, the OECD leader wrote, are rising inequalities of income, wealth, and opportunities, the growing disconnect between finance and the real economy, mounting divergence in productivity levels between workers, firms, and regions, winner-take-all dynamics in many markets, limited progressivity of our tax systems, true that, corruption and capture of politics and institutions by vested interests, lack of transparency and participation by ordinary citizens in decision-making, the soundness of the education, and the values we transmit to future generations. And my policies look at all of this. Elites, he wrote, have found myriad ways to change things on the surface so that in practice nothing changes at all. The people with the most to lose from genuine social change have placed themselves in charge of social change, often with the passive assent of those most in need of it. Or again, right, because they have the money and the power to at least put forward a movement, an organization, to make it look like they're doing stuff, a think tank, right? Instead of actually making the change. And the change that's required is drastic and radically changes the face of what our country and just about anywhere in the world looks like. And they're not willing to do it because they will lose their money and they will lose their power. It is fitting that an era marked by these tendencies should culminate in the election of Donald Trump. He is at once an exposer, an exploiter, and an embodiment of the cult of elite-led social change. He tapped, as few before him successfully had, into widespread intuition that elites were phonily claiming to be doing what was best for Americans. He exploited that intuition by whipping it into frenzied anger and then directing most of that anger not at elites, but at the most marginalized and vulnerable Americans. And again, this comes down to conservative psychology, right? Conservatives are much more sensitive, much more affected by negativity. They have a negativity bias. They seek out negativity, right? Then almost all conservative rhetoric is fear-based. So once you connect to someone with fear-based rhetoric, their brain turns off because of fear, right? Fight or flight. And then you can pretty much convince them of anything because their brain turns off and they're no longer thinking rationally. So that's pretty much the extent of conservatism right there. Pachunk! And not to say that Democrats don't do this too, because they do. That's the whole point of lesser of two evils voting, right? Vote blue no matter who. Either you vote for me or Orange Man Bad wins, right? So Democrats do it as well because they're both one party. They're both conservative parties, right? Democrats are center-right. Republicans are far-right lunatic fringe. So they both definitely take advantage of that. And it's definitely they do it so as to maintain the two-party system. Not that they need help in that, because the system is rigged that way in very, very many ways, which we have to. Very many ways which we have to change. Again, my first policy page was electoral reform, and there's just a shitload we have to change to even get to that. And he came to incarnate the very fraud that he fueled, that had fueled his rise, and that he had exploited. He became like the elites he assailed. Okay, no, he did not become like the elites. He was one of them. He was one of the worst of them. And stop using the fucking word elites, the predator class, right? It's been well known he's a liar and a con man and a fraud, and that's exactly what the predator class is, right? The establishment figure who falsely cast himself as a renegade. He became the rich, educated man who styles himself as the ablest protector of the poor and uneducated. This is just a lie. And who insists against all evidence that his interests have nothing to do with the change he seeks. He became the chief salesman for the theory, rife among the plutocratic change agents, that what is best for powerful him is best for the powerless too. Trump is the reductio ad absurdum of a culture that tasks elites with reforming the very systems that have made them and left others in the dust. Well, he just sold fear. Yeah, he sold fear, and he sold mostly that he said he was that he was an outsider, that he wasn't one of them. Although, yeah, he definitely, most assuredly was. One thing that unites those who voted for Trump and those who despaired at his being elected, and the same might be said for those for and against Brexit, is a sense that the country requires transformational reform. The question we confront is whether moneyed elites whether the moneyed predator class, who already rule the roost in the power, who already rule the roost in the economy and exert enormous influence in the corridors of political power, should be allowed to continue their quest of social change and of the pursuit of greater equality. The only thing better than controlling money and power is to control the efforts to question the distribution of money and power. They control the government, so they do that. The only thing better than being a fox is being a fox asked to watch over the hens, right? And that's exactly what we have. Corporate-owned government, right? Corporate and 1% owned government. We're a corporal plutoligarchy, right? What is at stake is whether the reform of our common life is led by governments elected by and accountable to the people, or rather by wealthy elites claiming to know our best interest. We must decide whether, in the name of ascendant values such as efficiency and scale, we are willing to allow democratic purpose to be usurped by private actors who often generally aspire to improve things, but first things first, seek to protect themselves. Yes, the American government is dysfunctional at present. That's kind. That's kind. It is completely and totally corrupt and subservient to the 1%. Dysfunctional is it's a heavy-handed euphemism. That's what this is. But that is all the more reason to treat its repair as our foremost national priority. Pursuing workarounds of our troubled democracy makes democracy even more troubled. We must ask ourselves why we have so easily lost faith in the engines of progress that got us where we are today. In the democratic efforts to outlaw slavery and child labor, limit the workday, keep drugs safe, protect collective bargaining, create public schools, battle the Great Depression, electrify rural America, weave a nation together by road, pursue a great free society of poverty, extend civil and political rights to women and African Americans and other minorities, and give our fellow citizens health, security, and a dignity in old age. Okay, so a lot of these people died and fought for. This wasn't the government just, doing the right thing. In almost no case throughout human history has the government done the right thing because it was the right thing. There was always this external pressure through protests and stuff like that, and wanting to make sure they stay in power, right? It's a self-defense mechanism. It is through that they end up throwing something together that ends up being good for the people, but only so much good for the people so that the predator class maintains their power, maintains their control over everything. Much like the Democratic Party, right? Every so often they'll throw the people a bone saying, see, we're the good guys, right? Obamacare was one of the largest transfers of wealth to the 1%, but yet we got some things out of that, right? That kids could stay on their parents' health care until 26, got rid of the pre-existing conditions and a bunch of other things, right? So they only give us so much. They only just give us just enough to make us believe that they still care and that they should still be in power. But not yet doing that which is really, really needed to be done. They don't do it because it's the right thing. They do it because it's self-defense. Right? Right? Right. Much of what happens to be reform in our time is, in fact, the defense of stasis. Exactly. When we see through the myths that foster this misperception, the path to genuine change will come into view. It will once again be possible to improve the world without permission slips from the powerful. Okay, so some of these articles here, right? It's nice that they're saying this, but give us. This is true, but what is the fucking answer? Give us solutions, right? I mean, like I've been talking solutions here in and out of this, right? But why aren't they talking about solutions? All right, any questions, comments, suggestions on this article? It's a decent article. Good article. But they don't, God, it's a long article, but they're not giving us solutions. All right, next. Questions, comments, and suggestions about that? Policies, the predator class, anything? Anything? I know nobody's watching, but anybody? Oh, hold on. Okay, good, I'm online. I'm using restream.io and it said I wasn't even streaming, so I'm streaming, thank God. Let me check Twitch just to make sure that my new key got updated, because that's kind of the most important part. Yep, good. All right, so got our first hour done. In the second hour, we're gonna start doing fossil fuel stuff. Anything, anybody. All right, there's another one by The Guardian. Did I just share it? I have not shared it. Okay, let's go and share it. Oh, I just shared it in the wrong place, that's all. There you go. All right, the other one from The Guardian. When was this last one done? This was done January of 2019. Okay, so this one is a little while ago. That's just following the, yes, before the election. All right, this one is from October 6th. This one is from yesterday. All right, fossil fuel industry gets subsidies of 11 million a minute, IMF finds. Trillions of dollars a year are adding fuel to the fire of climate crisis, experts say. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Again, part of that solution in my policies, get rid of subsidies, and then you start increasing the taxes on them, and then you give them 1 year to create a 5-year plan to shift to completely sustainable energy, or people or management owners start fucking going to jail. That's what you do. All right, the fossil fuel industry benefits from subsidies of 11 million every minute, according to analysis by the International Monetary Fund. The IMF found the production and burning of coal, oil, and gas was subsidized by 5.9 trillion in 2020. Now fucking read this. With not a single country, pricing all its fuels sufficiently to reflect their supply and environmental costs. Okay, I thought this was just the United States. I was losing my fucking mind that this was just the United States. Okay. All right, this is globally. All right, one more time. The IMF found the production and burning of coal, oil, and gas was subsidized by 5.9 trillion in 2020, with not a single country pricing all its fuels sufficiently to reflect their full supply and environmental costs. Right, because like the one study says that if we actually took into account the negative externalities, no business, especially the fossil fuel industry, would ever be profitable. But that's what we need to start doing. We need to start charging for the negative externalities. Pollution, exploitation, environmental damage, blah, 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 right? Experts said the subsidies were adding fuel to the fire of the climate crisis at a time when rapid reductions in carbon emissions were urgently needed. Yeah, true statement. Explicit subsidies that cut fuel prices accounted for 8% of the total, and tax breaks another 6%. The biggest factors were failing to make polluters pay for the deaths and poor health caused by air pollution. Yeah, 42%. Okay, and for heat waves and other impacts of global warming. Yeah. So again, negative externalities. What do we have that one post saying that 8.7 million people die in the United States. Is it the United States? A year due to pollution, or is it globally? It's probably globally. Let's take a look at this real quick. You can't see it, but I'm looking on Discord trying to find the article on this. Is this the one? 8.7 billion? No, I think that's... back a little bit farther. Oh, actually, it's in my policies. Hold on. Okay, it's globally. So 8.7 million people die per year from pollution. All right, so I'm going to read this again. Explicit subsidies that cut fuel prices accounted for 8% of the total, and tax breaks another 6%. The biggest factors were failing to make polluters pay for the deaths and poor health caused by air pollution, 42%, and for heat waves and other impacts of global heating. Yeah, so basically, fossil fuels are the primary driver for climate change. So yeah, they should be paying for all of it. And if you look at, I think I have that in here somewhere, there's a study that said, it's by some university, saying that if New York State, I think it's in my policies too, New York State shifted to sustainable energy, they could reap that back in healthcare savings alone. Yeah, here we go. Okay, the savings, okay. Okay, Okay, so according to the study, if New York switched to water, wind, sunlight, air pollution-related deaths would decline by 4,000 annually, and the state would save about 33 billion, 3% of the state's gross domestic product, in related health costs every year. That savings alone would pay for the new power infrastructure needed within about 17 years, or about 10 years if annual electricity sales are counted for. So shifting to sustainable energy would pay for itself basically in 10 years. The study also estimates that resultant emissions decreases would reduce 2050 US climate change. Okay, yeah, blah, blah, blah. That's the key thing. Just the healthcare savings alone. Okay, In 20 years, just by the healthcare savings alone would pay for itself by shifting to sustainable energy. But if you also take into account the annual electricity sales, it's in 10 years, right? Again, we don't need fossil fuels. And there's plenty of plans out there that look at how each state and how the whole country can shift to sustainable energy. I talk about it here, right? If the United States was serious about it, again, geothermal is the primary thing we need to do. And if the United States subsidized the drilling of the holes, that would be huge. That would definitely allow that geothermal to explode out there, because that's one of the largest parts of the cost of creating geothermal. And then, of course, tidal and wave and that sort of thing needs to be our baseload power. And then you can get into solar and all that sort of stuff. Setting fossil fuel prices that reflect their true cost would cut global CO2 emissions by over a third, the IMF analyst said. That would be a big step towards meeting the internationally agreed 1.5 degrees Celsius target. Keeping this target within reach is a key goal of the UN COP26 climate summit in November. Again, as we looked at RCP 8.5, we are far going to blow beyond this by 2100. We'll be at 4.6 degree increase because we're not doing jack shit to save humanity from extinction. I'm a little bit skeptical of. Ultimately, if we set fossil fuel prices that truly reflect their cost, they would be, you couldn't afford them. You couldn't afford it. Agreeing rules for carbon markets, which is carbon tax credits or whatever, is just garbage. Which enable the proper pricing of pollution is another COP26 goal. Fossil fuel price reform could not be timelier. It should have been done a decade ago. The IMF researchers said the ending of fossil fuel subsidies would also prevent nearly 1 million deaths a year from dirty air and raise trillions of dollars for governments, they said. Yes, they would. Yes, they fucking would. It's like I'm talking to myself sometimes, right? I'm talking about this stuff the whole time, right? There's nobody here, so I am talking to myself, so that's a lot of what I do, but, come on! You know the answers, just fucking do them. Fossil fuels benefited from subsidies of $5.9 trillion in 2020. Oil got the most, then coal, then gas and electric. The electric was the lowest. Wow. There would be enormous benefits from reform, so there's an enormous amount at stake, said Ian Perry, the lead author of the IMF report. Some countries are reluctant to raise energy prices because they think it will harm the poor. Okay, true, but holding down fossil fuel prices is a highly inefficient way to help the poor because most of the benefits accrue to wealthier households. It would be better to target resources towards helping poor and vulnerable people directly. Yeah, UBI, minimum wage increases, that's kind of the core of how you do that. But ultimately, municipalize energy production. That's what you do. And then you start putting trillions into the energy market, tidal, geothermal, and all the other stuff, right? And then, again, each country puts together it has 1 year to create a 5-year plan to shift to sustainable energy and sustainable farming. You need to do both. Sustainable farming is a large part of that pollution problem as well. Not so much the air problem, but water and the ground and that sort of stuff, right? So 1 year to create a 5-year plan to completely phase out and shift to sustainable farming and electricity. That's what needs to be done. Full stop. Because we don't even have 10 years, right? We don't even have that. We need to shift to regenerative society, not just carbon neutral, but carbon negative. With 50 countries committed to net zero emissions by mid-century and more than 60 carbon pricing schemes around the world, it's just ridiculous. There are some encouraging signs, Perry said, but we're still just scratching the surface, really, and there's an awful long way to go, and we don't have the fucking time for a long way to go. The G20 agreed in 2009 to phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, and in 2016, the G7 set a deadline of 2025. What the fuck bullshit is that? But little progress has been made. Of course, all this stuff is non-binding and toothless. In July, a report showed that the G20 countries had subsidized fossil fuels by trillions of dollars since 2015. The year the Paris climate deal was reached. Again, a Paris climate deal was fucking toothless, and it's performative garbage. It's nice to be there and say, hey, yeah, we'd like to do something about it, but not fucking do anything about it. It's, again, my policy is to say, yeah, sure, let's sign the damn thing, but it's climate political performative theater. That's it. That's all it is. Because it's not binding. It has nothing, no enforcement beyond it. Much like this G7 bullshit, much like all this garbage, there's no enforcement. None whatsoever. So again, much like the article we just read over here, right? The rich do things to make it look like they're doing things, but they don't actually do anything. They want to be in charge of it. That's right here. That's what this is. Political theater to make it think that they are doing things when they are in fact doing jack shit. To stabilize global temperatures, we must urgently move away from fossil fuels instead of adding fuel to the fire, said Mike Coffin, senior analyst at the think tank Carbon Tracker. It's critical that governments stop propping up an industry that is in decline and look to accelerate the low carbon energy transition and our future instead. Yep. As host of COP26, the UK government could play an important global leadership role by ending all subsidies for fossil fuels, as well as halting new North Sea licensing rounds. Yeah, and fucking Biden. Yeah, we'll go over this next, just because I'm pissed. As well as halting new North Sea licensing rounds, he said. The International Energy Agency, IEA, said in May that the development of new oil and gas fields must stop this year to meet climate goals. All right, let me go to all right. What I just read, I was going to say something. Yes. Yeah, okay, so here I kind of go into the core of what we do with the fossil fuel industry, right? To be held accountable, people go to jail, blah, blah, blah. Immediate and complete stop to fracking processes, right? And all patents, the proprietary patents shall be nullified and released to the public so we can find a way to clean up this absolute environmental idiocy. Their business managers, anyone who profited from this, as well as the government officials who passed this or agreed to do this, shall be tried and jailed for crimes against nature and humanity. See, I'm not fucking around here. Current applications to build pipelines, rigs, etc. will be terminated, and any incomplete projects will have their permits terminated, and those projects are to be completely recycled and their environments remediated. Any project that's not completely built and operational should terminate building and shall have their permit license terminated and those projects completely recycled. Corporate subsidies and tax breaks shall be terminated. They will receive a 20% increase in corporate and management taxes. Their financial actions will have to be approved by a governmental agency in order to prevent bypassing them or to avoid sabotaging the company. They have 1 year to create a 5-year plan to shift to sustainable energy, completely remediate all environmental damage, create our job training, retraining plan to work in sustainable and other, create a job retraining plan to work in sustainable energy and other related industries. All in preparation to be classified as a public utility, or everyone fucking goes to jail. That's what we need to be doing. The comprehensive IMF report found that prices were at least 50% below their true cost for 99% of coal, 52% of diesel, and 47% of natural gas in 2020. 5 countries were responsible for 2/3 of the subsidies. China, of course, because they're leaning heavily on the fossil fuel industry. The US, Russia, India, and Japan. Okay, without action, subsidies will rise to $6.4 trillion in 2025, the IMF said. Proper pricing for fossil fuels would cut emissions by, for example, encouraging electricity generators to switch from coal to renewable energy and making electric cars even cheaper, an even cheaper option for motorists. International cooperation is important, Perry said, to allay fears that countries could lose competitiveness if fossil fuel prices were higher. Again, so look at this. So sure, increasing the prices for fossil fuels, sure, that would change things a little bit. But the electric car things, people still get their electricity from coal plants and stuff like that. It's not. You have to put out the mandate, either change or go to jail, is what it boils down to. Either you shift to sustainable energy, or where you're putting your asses all in jail. That's what it boils down to. You have 1 year to create that 5-year plan, or shit's gonna hit the fan. That's what needs to be done. And not just the threats, right? But also pouring trillions into the economy to support these changes. All the energy production needs to be public domain. It needs to be owned by the public. Then you start throwing the trillions of dollars into it to shift to geothermal, tidal, solar, wind, and all that sort of stuff. And then it gets done quickly. The IMF report is a sobering read, pointing to one of the major defects of the global economy, said Maria Pestakova at the think tank E3G. The IEA's net zero roadmap projects that $5 trillion is necessary by 2030 to put the world on a pathway to a climate safe world. It is maddening to realize the much needed change could start happening now, if not for government's entanglement with the fossil fuel industry in so many major economies. Well, it's not just the subsidies, it's the fact that the rich and the corporations own the governments. I mean, they own our politicians, they own the government. And they practically just say, hey, we want a fossil fuel subsidy. We wrote the law for you, just go ahead and pass this, and hey, life is good. It's not just entanglement, it's being bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry. Fossil fuel subsidies have been a major stumbling block in the G20 process for years, she said. Now all eyes are on the G20 Leaders' Summit in late October. Again, the politicians that go to these things are bought and paid for by the 1% in the fossil fuel industry. So, I mean, hello. Ipek Gensu at the Overseas Development Institute said subsidy reform requires support for vulnerable consumers who will be impacted by rising costs, as well for workers in industries which simply have to shut down. It also requires information campaigns showing how the savings will be redistributed to society in the form of healthcare, education, and other social services. Many people oppose subsidy reform because they see it solely as governments taking something away and not giving back. Well, yeah, so a part of this, maybe I should put this in my policies, that one way to help prevent this problem is that if they are going to have price increases, there have to be price controls. You have to go through the government and say, okay, you can only increase by this much per year. So you get the additional 20% tax on profits, the additional 20% tax on management, and you implement price controls so that they can't send it over to the consumer, and then they have to suck it up, and they have to make the changes. So shit's gonna have to go quickly. The G20 countries emit almost 80% of global greenhouse gases. More than 600 global companies in the We Mean Business Coalition include Unilever, IKEA, Aviva, Siemens, and Volvo Cars, recently urged G20 leaders to end fossil fuel subsidies by 2025. All right, there you go. I'm gonna add price controls to my policies. That sounds like a very good thing to do, right? Right? You guys like that idea? Anybody? Again, you subsidize and give tax breaks. Maybe we need to add more to this. Give tax breaks to sustainable energy. In addition to the taxes. Good idea. Glad you guys thought of it. Thanks so much for the help. All right, so there's that one. Half an hour left. Any thoughts on environmental reform? How fucked we are? Anybody? Anybody? If you want to learn more about that, there's this right here. Again, on my policies, let me go here. I'll give you a link to this so you have it. This is just kind of the video section. It's right here. There's 2 videos here. We went over this on stream. I don't know, maybe a month ago. This is the short video, which is about 20 minutes. I didn't put that in here. I didn't put a link to it. Yes, I have to fix this. This is about 20 minutes. And this is kind of just the cut up of this one, which is like 50 minutes, almost an hour. It just shows how, you know, throughout all of the studies and the indicators we have, we are right on target for RCP 8.5. It's pretty fucking sobering. If you haven't watched it, please, dear God, watch this. You kind of, so you can start entering your stage of doomerism now. And yeah, because we're fucked. Right there. It's right here. We're so fucked. Oh yeah, so here. All right, so I was getting pissed on this. All right, let's go off. Oh my God, this is so fucking stupid. Like, super, mega, ultra, like, oh my God, just the fucking hypocrisy of it. Yeah, I've torn him apart. I've torn the Biden's climate plan apart. Several times, but this is just shows the hypocrisy and how much he's not fucking serious about anything with the climate. When is this? This is from, okay, so it's from Truthout. This is from a few weeks ago. Biden administration shuns IPCC report in argument to expand offshore drilling. So this fuckerhead is expanding offshore drilling, even though we're headed towards RCP 8.5, right? This is September 20th, so this is the, 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago? Something like that. Yeah, just over 3 weeks ago. Fuck this dude, war criminal. All right, so can I get this? All right. As the Biden administration pushes forward with plans to expand offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, officials have argued that alarming research presented in the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report isn't sufficient to pause or reassess drilling plans. Isn't this is fucking, God, this is infuriating. This is, This is, I just want to punch something. So we're headed for human extinction in the next 200 years, and he's like, meh, it don't mean much. I got corporate profits to give. I got subsidies to hand out, bitches. As first reported by the Daily Poster, the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, BOEM, wrote in a recent document that the IPCC report does not prevent sufficient cause for the agency to take a second look at the administration's plan to continue issuing leases for drilling. What kind of absolute total fucking stupidity is that? Anybody? It is fucking ludicrous. If you want to see a primary example of how our government is bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry, chunk, it's right here. Right fucking here. The Bureau instead opens the door to future fossil fuel development projects. The report, as well as additional analysis of climate change, may be a significant consideration in the department's decisions regarding oil and gas leasing programs in the future. Officials wrote, but not today, because fuck the future. Climate advocates were frustrated with the agency's callous regard toward the IPCC report and the decision to march ahead with the leasing. The honeymoon's over between climate groups and the Biden administration. Friends of the Earth Deputy Legal Director Hallie Templeton told the Daily Poster. Yeah, I mean, anyone who had any illusions that the Biden administration was going to give a flying fuck about our future, I mean, you were totally and completely delusional. I mean, there's just no way, right? And it's just delusional. Anyone who thought that there was going to be any good stuff, really good stuff, come out of here, you were vote blue no matter who. That's this level of delusion that you're having, and it's not a good look. It's now September. They've been in office for 8 months. It's time for them to show that they have priorities and are meaningfully going to move in the right direction. In the BOEMS document, the administration argues that officials must comply with the court order that requires them to lease about 80 million acres as the Gulf of Mexico for 80 million acres of the Gulf of Mexico for fossil fuel projects. The court order was a product of a lawsuit by states that are led by fossil fuel funded Republicans. Earlier this year, they sued the administration over an order that would have blocked the sale. Fuck them. Who cares? Climate advocates argued that the Biden administration has the power to decide whether or not to hold land sales for drilling. Earth Justice, on behalf of Friends for the Earth, Sierra Club, Healthy Gulf, and Center for Biological Diversity, filed a lawsuit at the end of August, arguing that, given the urgency of the climate crisis, the lease sale cannot go forward. This lease sale is deeply disappointing. The Biden administration has folded to the oil industry based on its campaign of disinformation and political pressure, ignoring the worsening climate emergency phase. Okay, said Brittany Hardy, an Earth Justice attorney. Okay, this was incorrect. They have not folded, the Biden administration has not folded to the industry based on its campaign of disinformation and political pressure. They're bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry. There's no folding. This is anyone who's been paying attention to politics. I mean, really, you know that nothing good was going to happen. You know they're bought and paid for. I mean, nothing was ever going to happen. It's delusional to think otherwise. Our planet cannot handle more stress from oil and gas production, yet the Biden administration is plowing ahead with a lease sale that will have impacts for decades into the future. Since Hurricane Ida slammed Louisiana and swept through the country to New York, causing floods and devastation along the way, President Biden has been touring areas hard hit by the climate crisis, and yet isn't going to do jack shit about it. Climate researchers say that Ida was fueled largely by the climate crisis and rapidly rising water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. Climate change poses an existential threat to our lives, to our economy, and the threat is here. Biden said while on tour earlier this month, we can stop it from getting worse, but you're not. But you're not going to. Again, this is the Democrats' performative political theater. They talk about it. It's like they talk leftist, and then they give leases for oil and gas. They vote Republican. They vote conservative. They vote corporate, right? We can stop it from getting worse, but we're not going to because there's no profit in that. Because our corporate owners aren't going to profit from that so much. Climate advocates say that Biden has thus far been all talk on climate without the policy proposals or pressure on Congress to show for it. True that. As one of his first actions in office, Biden signed an order to stop oil and gas leasing on federal lands, a move that was lauded by climate advocates. Yeah, see, but here, what this says is basically to not issue more leases for oil and gas, and the existing ones could continue going even if they haven't started, their drilling or whatever. This is, I mean, it's it's such a short-term thing that can be easily overdone by the next administration. It's again performative. But since then, Biden has become softer on the chief architects of the climate crisis. Biden can use his powers to stop supercharging the climate crisis with drilling, fracking, and disastrous projects like Line 3, or he can just keep repeating talking points, approving fossil fuel development, and listening to Joe Manchin, which makes him nothing more than a disaster tourist. True statement. That's exactly what he is. He's doing his part to look like he cares while still voting for the problem. Cassie Siegel, Climate Law Institute Director at the Center for Biological Diversity, told Rolling Stone. Ooh. Interesting. All right. Just affirming the reality of the climate crisis isn't enough, say climate advocates who liken major policies that sideline the crisis to climate denial. True statement. In negotiations for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, Biden allowed conservative Democrats and Republicans to carve climate provisions out of the bill nearly entirely, and he has done little to try to whip people like Senator Manchin into shape on major roadblocks to climate action like the filibuster. Again, my policies: get rid of the filibuster, get rid of the debt ceiling, get rid of the bird rule, get rid of, what's the other thing? Bird rule. What is the other thing? Filibuster, debt ceiling. Oh, that's okay. This is the economic section. Hold on. The bird rule. There's one other rule we have to get rid of. Pay-go. You have to get rid of a debt ceiling, filibuster, pay-go, bird rule, right? The IPCC report released last month warned of increasingly dire consequences if the world continues on its current trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions. Other global energy bodies have warned that the world must stop pursuing new fossil fuel projects if we are to avoid the worst impacts of the climate crisis. But we're already seeing them every single day. All right. You read that article last week that the climate crisis is here. It's not just, coming, it's here. It's been here. And all right, that's enough of that. Enough climate doomerism. Let's move on. 15 minutes left, so let's close out and maybe some positive things. Do I have some positive things? I don't know if I can do that. Can I do that? Okay, so let's not do that. All right. Let's do this. Hope you weren't hoping to feel good coming here, because that's not what we do. Son of a balls in a box. Any other questions, comments, concerns about the environment, climate change? I was going to do yeah, that's what I was gonna do. Okay, so there's a quote. The United States is not really a country anymore. It is the largest supranational corporate conglomerate with its own private military, which is by far the largest in the world. And by virtue, America's largest export is terrorism. That is our largest export. That is our country's largest export. We're terrorizing the world. The coups, right? Afghanistan, Central South America, Iraq, Yemen, Libya. We can go on. Yeah, and here's a poll which shows which people, what country these countries believe is the largest threat to world peace. The United States is a large part of what the world thinks is the greatest inhibitor to world peace, right? So like up here, U.S. machine for war and terrorism, right? And I talk about the United States as global terrorism projects, right? That's what we are. All right, so stop calling the military budget a defense budget. To call the Pentagon's massive and escalating budget a defense budget is nothing less than internalized corruption of language that undermines our capacities to think clearly or talk straight. Fair. It's bad enough that mainstream news outlets routinely call the Pentagon's budget a defense budget, but the fact that progressives in Congress and even many anti-war activists also do the same is an indication of how deeply the mindsets of the nation's warfare state are embedded in the political culture of the United States. Well, part of that's what it's called, is the defense budget, much like which I'm trying to do, is instead of calling them the elite, calling them the predator class or and so on. You'd have to really actively, make an effort on to figure out how you're going to change the word defense budget into something else. Like for me, right? The budget for global terrorism projects, that's probably what we should call it. The budget for global terrorism projects. You have to figure out what that phrase is and then do that and start doing that. And if you can get other activist organizations to do that as well, that can also help. All right, the misleading first name of the Defense Department doesn't justify using defense as an adjective for its budget. On the contrary, the ubiquitous use of phrases like defense budget and defense spending, virtually always written with the lowercase d, reinforces the false notion that equates the U.S.'s humongous military operations with defense. In the real world, the United States spends more money on its military than the next 10 countries altogether, and most of those countries are military allies. What about military bases in foreign countries? The United States currently has 750, while Russia has about 24, and China has 1. The author of the landmark book Based Nation, American University professor David Vine, just co-wrote a report that points out the United States has at least 3 times as many overseas bases as all other countries combined. Those U.S. bases abroad cost taxpayers an estimated $55 billion annually. As this autumn began, Vine noted that President Biden is perpetuating the United States' endless wars in nations including Iraq, Syria, Somalia, and Yemen, while escalating warlike tensions with China, with a military buildup with Australia and the UK. All this is being funded via, quote, a defense budget. Calling George Orwell. As Orwell wrote in a 1946 essay, political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidarity to pure wind. In 2021, the hot air blowing at gale force through U.S. mass media is so continuous that we're apt to scarcely give it a second thought. So that's the power of ubiquitous propaganda 24/7. But the euphemisms would hardly mean anything to those in faraway countries for whom terrifying and lethal drone attacks and other components of U.S. air wars are about life and death rather than political language. Again, there is the, like this week, right? The United States committed a drone attack on a guy delivering water, working for a nonprofit, killing kids and family, right? And fortunately, the media, in some parts, held them accountable, and nonprofits held them accountable for this cold-blooded murder of innocent people, and got them to say, yeah, they say we fucked up, even though they, they're just fucked in the brain, right? Okay, here we go. Let's talk about it right here. You might consider the Pentagon's August 29 killing of 10 Afghan civilians, including 7 children, with a drone attack to be a case of respectable murder or negligent homicide or mere collateral damage. Likewise, you could look at numbers like 244,124, a credible low-end estimate of the number of civilians directly killed in the war on terror in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, and consider them to be mere data points or representing individuals whose lives are as precious as yours. But at any rate, from the vantage point of the United States, it is far-fetched to claim that the billions of dollars expended for ongoing warfare in several countries are in a budget that can be legitimately called defense. Until 1947, the official name of the U.S. government's central military agency was the War Department. Oh. After a 2-year interim brand with the clunky name National Military Establishment, it was renamed to the Department of Defense in 1949. As it happened, that was the same year when Orwell's dystopian novel 1984 appeared, telling of an always at war totalitarian regime with doublespeak slogans that included war is peace. Today, the Department of Defense remains an appropriately capitalized proper noun, but the department's official name doesn't make it true. To call its massive and escalating budget a defense budget is nothing less than internalized corruption of language that undermines our capacities to think clearly and talk straight. While such corroded language can't be blamed for the existence of sloppy thinking and degraded discourse, it regularly facilitates sloppy thinking and degraded. It regularly facilitates sloppy thinking and degraded discourse. I thought it was repeating there. Let's blow away the linguistic fog. The Pentagon budget is not a defense budget. True debt. There's some interesting things in here. I may have to take some of what's in here and add this to my policy, because the bases thing is a big issue. All right. So tell you what, we'll do one more. This one will be positive, I think, and then I'll get going because I'm actually kind of hungry right now. So we'll probably end a little bit early today, I think. Let's check this out. Something that Bernie Sanders has been voting for, right? Talking about USPS begins postal banking pilot program. The test allows customers to cash business and payroll checks at the post office and place them onto a gift card. This is from October 4. Okay. What, a gift card for the Postal Service? So you can buy all the things you want at the Postal Service? All right, let's take a look at this. United States Post Office and Bank. But it's not really a bank. Okay, okay. This is a part of my policies as well. It's a good idea, especially for areas which don't have the infrastructure. The post office can be a bank as well. All right. The United States Postal Service has taken the most dramatic step in a half century to reestablish a postal banking system in America. In 4 pilot cities, customers can now cash payroll or business checks of up to $500 in most post office locations and have the money put onto a single-use gift card. It's the most far-reaching executive action that the Biden administration has taken since Inauguration Day. And so to establish it as a bank does require a lot more paperwork, but okay. The move puts the USPS in direct competition with the multi-billion-dollar check cashing industry. Okay, so here's a question. If it goes on to a gift card, how much does the business whose gift card that is, the corporation whose business card, whose gift card that is, how much do they make off it? So again, postal banking still makes billions for corporations. Again, this is why we need to have public banking, publicly owned banking. That's what this needs to be, public banking. The move puts the USPS in direct competition with the multi-billion-dollar check cashing industry, which operates storefronts to allow unbanked or underbanked residents to cash their paychecks. Okay, well, we have to see where are these gift cards. Where do these gift cards go to? Are these gift cards by the U.S. government? I need to know more about how this transaction works. According to the USPS spokesperson, Tatiana Roy, the pilot launched on September 13th in 4 locations: Washington, D.C., Falls Church, Virginia, Baltimore, and the Bronx, New York. The test system, Prospect Art Director Jandos Rothstein To test the system, Prospect Art Director Jandos Rothstein visited the post office in Falls Church on Saturday and successfully cast a business check onto a Visa gift card. Here you go. This is it. So Visa's making bank off this, right? What percentage goes into this? That's what we need to know. What percentage do they get out of this? More from David Dayan. At first, the postal worker said she didn't think she could take the check. Rothstein said, but she read the check into her scanner and it went through. He didn't need to show identification or endorse the check. The post office charged Rothstein a flat fee of $5.95 for any amount up to $500. Why the fuck is the post office charging for it? Oh my fucking god. God damn it. So this is more of the it's another poverty tax is what this is. Anyone who's most likely going to use the post office is going to be impoverished. Or, you know, lower class, lower middle class, whatever. They have less options. So this is a fucking poverty fee. Making poverty more fucking expensive. Several large check cashing chains charge a percentage that comes out to $15 or more for a $500 check. Walmart charges between $4 and $8 for check cashing. A generic gift card, an existing product sold at post office locations, can be used like a bank debit card, either to take money out of an ATM, though that would not, for now, incur fees, or pay for goods or services either online or at point of sale retail locations. Because the only innovation in the test pilot involves allowing gift cards to be purchased with a business payroll check, no additional authority from Congress was required. Those who set up the product expansion are confident that it falls within their legal mandate. Few would have named Louis DeJoy as the official who would set in motion the most consequential executive action of the President Biden's first term. Okay, well, this is surprising. This corrupt garbage face implemented it. Okay, well, that's maybe less garbage. The test pilot is extremely limited. Only one post office location in each pilot city is participating, but officials have floated ideas for how it could expand. The card could be reloadable rather than single use. Used to store multiple paychecks over time, the USPS could keep track of card value. Yep, accounting for a user's balance in case it gets lost or stolen. Yeah, that's exactly what it should be. It should be public motherfucking banking is what it should be. Public fucking banking is what it should be. Ovary up, bitches, and implement it. Postal gift cards currently branded for business like Barnes & Noble or Olive Garden, as well as the generic Visa card, could be branded as coming specifically from the USPS with no fee branded ATMs inside post office buildings. Another possibility have been discussed, like bundling gift cards with a postal money order to pay bills or making domestic money transfers from one post office to another. Fuck yeah. The USPS already offers international money transfers to 9 Latin American countries, a program called Dinero Seguro. Yeah, postal banking, that's what needs to happen. In other words, a few simple expansions would effectively make this product a postal bank account. The first since the original postal banking system shut down in 1967 after 56 years in operation. At its height, 4 million Americans had bank accounts at the post office. A modern postal banking system could underprice non-bank financial products and give people with little or no access to financial services the ability to use USPS network of 31,000 facilities, extending to every zip code in the country. Adding revenue for a postal service with shrinking mail volume is a secondary benefit. Okay, so this doesn't fucking matter. The postal service does not have to profit. This needs to fucking go. This needs to get the fuck out of here. This statement. The United States Post Office is not a business. It is a service provided by the U.S. government. It is not there to make profit. It does not have to make profit. Period. Full stop. Full motherfucking stop. Let's look at this. Let's there's some things here that need, okay, here we go. So yeah, here's some reforms on this, because of course Republicans and Democrats have fucked it over. So the USPS is not a business. It is a federal government service, and it is not required to create profit. Period. It's just like the U.S. military, honestly. And the 1970 Postal Reorganization Act that Nixon signed, which shifted the USPS from a department of the federal government to a corporation. Right. Okay, so currently it operates like a corporation, which is fucked in the brain. This is just a step towards privatizing it, right? So we need to get rid of this and then turn it back to a part of the federal government. And then, officially it'll be this. In the 2006 Postal Accountability Enhancement Act that Bush signed, which required the pre-funding of retirement health benefits, no other federal agency has to do this nonsense, and is one of the primary reasons jacking up the USPS's cost of operation. Yeah, this is just again done by Republicans to try and force the hand of the Postal Service to privatize it. Right? These are things we need to do to fix the problems with the Postal Service. And see, postal banking, got that up here somewhere. There you go. Post offices should offer basic banking services in general, which greatly benefits more rural areas which do not have access to banks. Yeah. So there you go. If I read about I've already read the policies here. They're here. If you want to take a look at my economic policies, it is right there. Offering new products and services that are affordable, convenient, and secure aligns with the Postal Service's Delivering for America 10-year plan to achieve financial sustainability and service excellence, said USPS spokesperson Roy in a statement to the Prospect. This pilot, which is in collaboration with the American Postal Workers Union, is an example of how the Postal Service is leveraging its vast retail footprint and resources to innovate. That collaboration and the USPS rolling out a key financial inclusion product that progressives have championed for years is what makes the announcement so staggering. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy has become a high-profile villain to liberals, well, not really liberals, but progressives, since taking over last May, condemned for almost immediately causing significant slowdowns mail, as well as ethical concerns surrounding the USPS awarding contracts to the company he previously ran. DeJoy's 10-year plan rolled out this year would cement this dysfunction by permanently slowing down target delivery times and raising prices for some first-class mail, and particularly around the holidays. Yeah, fuck this guy. So here's the thing, right? You roll it out for a few places and then just say, not ever do anything with it again, or just say, hey, it's not making enough money, so we're gonna end it, right? Again, it's just a bone, and then you can get rid of it at some point. The APWU has consistently criticized DeJoy. Last Thursday, Union President Mark Diamondstein criticized the changes to service standards, saying the people deserve the prompt, reliable, and efficient mail service promised under the law. We believe management's response to months of poor performance should be to improve service and to regain the public's trust instead of this focus on moving the goalposts and slowing service standards. True statement. Few would have named DeJoy as the official who would set in motion the most consequential executive action of President Biden's first term. And even fewer would have correctly pegged that he would do it in cooperation with the APWU, one of the biggest antagonists. Yeah, this is kind of surprising. But the union has been laser focused on getting postal leadership to embrace banking for many years, seeing it as an attractive product to bring in customers and promote financial inclusion. In 2016, the APWU successfully negotiated postal banking pilots in its USPS collective bargaining agreement. Okay, that's interesting. However, the previous Postmaster General, Megan Brennan, ignored this obligation and dragged her feet on the pilots. Okay. The APWU considered filing a grievance, but ultimately decided that even if it won a pilot, postal leadership would not put in the energy and resources necessary for the project to succeed. Well, that's going to happen anyhow. Instead, when DeJoy took over, the union engaged him personally in a series of meetings, pitching the postal banking idea again. In a sign that DeJoy was interested, those meetings soon became weekly events involving technical staff. They listened, they didn't shut us down, said one APWU source involved in the negotiations. They have made the analysis that the future of the USPS lies not in letters, but in packages, and they see the expansion of financial services as a companion to the package market. What fucking sense does that make? Well, to an extent, letters are going down because we're emailing almost emailing a lot of things. I am curious what the numbers are on that. How much have the letters gone down that are going to the USPS? Okay, that's fair. One way the APW got this across, union sources explained, was through an anecdote about another country with a postal banking system, Switzerland. If you order a pair of shoes online in Switzerland and they don't fit, you can take them back to the post office to return. Not only will they ship the shoes back to the retailer, but they will instantly credit your postal savings account. This fits with the USPS mission of efficiently promoting commerce, and it creates a competitive advantage over other shippers. The USPS leadership obviously saw that as a selling point. Well, that's interesting. That's cool. That's super cool. A good sign for the union that DeJoy had real interest in financial services was when a division of the Postal Service attempted to cancel the agency's Dinero Seguro international money transfer program. The proposal got all the way to DeJoy's desk, and he dismissed it. Okay, not a total shitbag. Good to hear. They held off. They thought that's an area they can grow, said the APW source. As for the APWU managed these delicate negotiations while also fighting the USPS on service standards and mail rate changes, the two sides managed to carry out their work on a parallel track while acknowledging that they will have agreements and disagreements. If they are willing to advance something we like, said the source, we're not going to shut the door. Okay, but fair. How much more is there to this? I'm actually kind of hungry here. Okay, we'll get through this. The union initially wanted the debit cards to be reloadable, but ultimately for their test pilot, it was decided that they would stick with single-use cards. The price point of $5.95 is also higher than the original concept, though that could be tweaked later. And while currently just one location per region is offering check cashing, the APWU envisions every post office in an area being able to offer the same financial service. Okay, so what this would eventually look like, of course, postal banking, right? They have a savings account or checking account, most likely a checking account, and then you have a debit card. That's probably ultimately what it would end up being like. Pilot was always framed internally as a stepping stone to something bigger, and if the current test is successful, other features would likely be added. Marissa Baradaran, a law professor at the University of California, Irvine, and a postal banking expert, said in an interview that the effort was incredibly safe legally. You have all the authority you need. She stressed the need for USPS to underprice Walmart on check cashing. Underprice Walmart on check cashing. Currently, the price point is roughly a little more for checks under 500 if that's altered, she said. It could be a successful product. The post office has way more locations than Walmart, Baradaran noted. Okay, that's surprising. Okay, that makes sense, I suppose, because they're even in much more rural areas. Okay. Among the other options Baradaran thought would eventually be necessary is some sort of security element in case the gift cards are lost or stolen. One way to do that would be adding a Venmo-like arrangement where balances and debits could be easily tracked and transfers made from point to point. It's important down the road to establish the proof of concept of an app, Baradaran said. Do it well or don't do it at all. Such a service would require unique ID but no documentation, allowing housing insecure people to use the accounts. Additionally, the gift card setup does not contemplate FDIC deposit insurance, but the Postal Service does carry the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. In fact, that security was part of the early advantages of postal banking after its establishment in 1911, before the FDIC existed. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Again, that's why this is important. Right? So I bet as long as they are a corporation, they'll probably need FDIC. So we honestly, I think we're going to need to end this and return it to the federal government so that the federal government fully and completely funds it instead of it having to be a quote corporation. Previously, President Biden's most impactful executive action involved increasing the minimum wage for federal contractors to $15 an hour. Thousands of contract workers at Maximus, a call center operator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, just secured the new pay increase last week. But while that has a relatively limited reach, postal banking could bring potentially millions of unbanked and underbanked people into the financial system. The Prospects Executive Action Tracker, which monitors 77 discrete actions that the president can take using their own authority, now lists 13 that have been accomplished with the rollout of postal banking. This is not the rollout of postal banking. It's just a test. Don't oversell it, you bastards. Executive Action Tracker, don't oversell this. That's just ridiculous. Biden has been somewhat reluctant to use his authority to go beyond reversing Trump's actions, and there has been a troubling lack of follow-through at some points. Imagine that, because he's a fucking tool. Most notably with his decision to agree to a patent waiver for COVID-19 vaccines at the World Trade Organization. Of course, Bill Gates is the one who championed that, right? Just fuck Bill Gates. We had a whole article on that. Bill Gates is a fucking monster. That process has stalled out, with the Biden administration doing little to move it forward since their announcement in April. That's what makes the postal banking pilot so unusual and so promising. The federal agency is creatively applying its power to benefit the public in a tangible way, which can be quickly rescinded and destroyed at a moment's notice. That it's led by a top villain of the Trump resistance is noteworthy, and there could be any number of reasons for that. But motivations aside, what the USPS is doing on financial services could spur the rest of the administration to follow its lead. Well, that would be nice, but I'm not fucking holding my breath. All right. Last call for comments. And we're calling it a day because I am actually kind of hungry. Anybody? Anybody? All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for gifting me with your time. Everyone, have a great week. Again, I'll be streaming on Friday at 3 p.m. U.S. Central. And if you want to support me or follow me, on Twitch here, the About area, there's Discord, blog, Patreon, all that sort of stuff down there. So there you go. All right, everyone, have a great week. See you later.
Just me and you, let's make up all the rules. Count to 10 and watch the stars turn blue.